All right, how we doing? It's a little quiet in here. It's a little like, everybody's kind of like morning, caffeine slump, all that kind of stuff. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Barry Tanner, Deputy Don CIO. I have the privilege of leading a panel of some of our chiefs within the Don CIO to deep dive a little bit more into ISV 2.0. You're going to have to put up with, a former nuke who's now an IT guy, right? So that's like everybody's worst nightmare. But hopefully we'll be able to explain what we're trying to accomplish here in a little bit more specificity. The goal here is to be interactive, right? So we didn't get a whole lot of volunteers for questions after Jane's remarks. We're going to hopefully try to shame you all into getting up and actually speaking a bit, because we're gonna challenge your perceptions of how we're moving out in the Department of the Navy, and we expect to hear some questions about, well, what do you mean by that, and how are you really trying to do that? So, please, take good notes, and we're ready for some hard questions at the end of this.
I forgot to introduce you because you're new. You want to give a little bit of background about yourself?
Okay, now, see, this is why I love working for Jane, right? She loves to throw hard balls and curve balls when you're standing up in front of a room of people, right? That's great. So yes, for those of you who don't know who I am, I've been in the job since last August. Prior to that, I was with PEO Digital. You may all have heard about this thing called flank speed and the stuff that we did there, so I had something to do with that. And changing around how PEO Digital worked from an operational mindset. I am an operator by background. Prior to my time there, I spent 4 years at Fleet Cyber as the N6. And activated reservist, so also been in industry a bunch, working for other companies, and as I mentioned before, former nuke officer. But the reason I'm here and the reason why we're all here doing this is that our time is short. You heard this morning from Admiral Thomas, from General Carter, from Ms. Beavers about some key themes. These are some foundational concepts that, as I bring the panel up here, we're going to talk about going forward. But, Admiral Thomas talked about ecosystem, right? The CNO talking about various ecosystems, and you'll see that theme all over the ISV 2.0 and the things that we're doing and aligned to the ISV 2.0. General Carter, God bless him, stole my thunder and said, move faster. Anybody who knows me knows that speed matters, and it's go faster, faster now, right? That is the overall theme of everything that's going on, because the clock, as I said, is ticking. And finally, Ms. Beavers really hit it great when it comes to scale, right? That's a great question that, from an operational perspective, we always have to ask ourselves. Does that scale? It may be the coolest widget you've ever seen in your entire life, but if I can't deploy it to over 750,000 sailors and Marines and civilians around the globe, then I really can't use it, right? So that's got to be a consideration right up front. Thousands of small decisions are made every day by awesome people doing awesome work to build capability and to deploy new things and support old things for the fleet. Every one of those small decisions can ripple through and have a massive impact. So if we don't give folks guidance, if we don't give folks the right frame of reference to make those decisions, then we will end up in a chaotic, complex, and extremely hard to support environment. Does that sound familiar? Right? That's kind of where we are. Design principles matter. People who work with me are sick of hearing me say design principles, but it's very important to support those making those small decisions every day, that they have those design principles. We're going to talk about what we consider those principles from the ISV 2.0 perspective, but every day you should be thinking to yourself, what are how am I ensuring that I am delivering what I need to deliver in the larger context? And if you don't know, ask, right? It's important. So I'm going to ask our chiefs to come up and please have a seat at the table. You all know who you are. So I'll introduce them as they're walking up. We're going to have Justin Finelli, our current acting chief technology officer. We're going to have Beth Caswell, our current acting chief of data integration and optimization. Art DeLeon, who is our lead for Spectrum here in the Don CIO. We've got, let's see here, I don't see, oh, there we go. And we have Tony Plater, who is our acting Chief Information Security Officer. We've got Alicia Scott, who is going to be representing our Decide pillar and our CDAO office. And finally, Emily Gaughan, who's going to be talking about workforce. So as we go through this, we're gonna march through, and I guess to the point earlier, I guess I have the slides, or no, I don't have the slides. Somebody else have the slides? Somebody else has the slides. Okay, if we can put up the slide for optimize, we're gonna start there. So when we talk about these pillars, optimize, secure, decide, they set the vision and direction in order to guide those decisions I talked about before. In all cases, the idea here is give everyone a direction, right? If you're driving a ship, if you're driving a submarine like I did, position of intended motion is something you're tracking all the time, right? Am I making progress towards my goal? So knowing what your goal is, understanding how you know whether you're making it or not, practicing, measuring, adjusting, and repeating, right? These tool sets, these pillars, the detail behind these pillars are what we're hoping will help all of us out there trying to make good decisions every day do so in alignment, in coordination, and support those things we heard from leaders earlier today about building that ecosystem, going faster, and making sure it scales. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Justin to talk about the part of Modernize where we're the part of Optimize, excuse me, where we're modernizing capabilities and driving innovation. Go ahead.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, Patriots. First and foremost, as we know, this happens with our warfighters and the people in this room. No one else is coming to save us, right? And so the prevailing theme so far this morning, anyone want to say it? One word? All right. So in high school, my football coach said, Justin, be faster. And that's not that helpful in terms of like actionable guidance. We are supposed to be faster, but what does that look like? What do we do with our hands? And so Optimize is tailored specific direction for what the scoreboard is for where we're going faster and how we're going faster, right? And so when we say things like double down on cattle drive, we like initiatives, we like pilots, we like Horizon 2. We like it most when it drives something to Horizon 0. And so when we are able to start with the end in mind and pilot new capabilities that will result in not one for one, but one for many structured divestments, when we are working across these lines, but across all lines to say, hey, we know that tech debt is through the roof and we've waited too long to address that. What can we do about that? That is part of Optimize. PEO Digital has moved to a portfolio model for in no small part because we are looking to treat our decisions as data-driven decisions and treat our investments as cattle, not pets, so that we can support our warfighters in the highest impact and the highest value way. That starts with smart investments, looking across the aperture and being sailor and marine focused, and that ends with actually turning things off. And we can't do that without you. They say one of the hardest things to do is turn something off in the government. We've done a lot of that in the last 2 years, and we need to do exponentially more. And the way that I've seen, so the model that I've seen work best is when you have an unleashed industry team holding the hands of a government pilot lead and a portfolio pilot lead to usher it all the way in. If you are waiting for the government to give you the blueprint to turn off a particular, that is not the way we dance. So finding that scrappy opportunity as a vendor lead and existing and future, we'll take volunteers, pilot leads to pull those things all the way through is one of the best, most tangible, actionable ways to optimize. I'm happy to give a lot more examples. So a couple just recent ones. It was already mentioned by our CIO that we achieved the Zero Trust moniker 3 years ahead of deadline. That is weird for government. It's also emblematic of the swagger that we all want, looking for more opportunities to do that and then taking away excuses. And so specifically Flank Speed Nautilus and Flank Speed Wireless out of the gate. Nautilus is further along, but there's a lot of scaling to be done there. Flank Speed Wireless is an example of PEOs working across lines to get things done. We're excited about the unified endpoints possibilities. We're excited about AI implementation across the board, and then you'll hear SIPR mod and IL6 quite a bit this week. So those are some of the initiatives, both existing and coming down the pike. In terms of the how, it's the same how, so please don't start from scratch. Please leverage what's already been done. Start on second or third base. This includes the blueprint that N2N6 mentioned. This includes the WAMs and how we measure. That's the scoreboard. The scoreboard, whenever someone says, go faster, go harder, it doesn't mean send us more emails. That won't help. It means submit lean business cases, find a pilot, execute that, and show disruptive WAMs, outcomes that show that status quo is unacceptable and that we can do multiples better, exponentially, not linearly better. There's the horizons, that's our pipeline. There are ACDC documents, accelerating change design concept documents on each of these. None of them are more than 3 pages long. That includes structured divestments, structured piloting, and then adaptive roadmaps soon.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate that. Now I'm going to hand it off to Beth to talk a little bit more about how we're optimizing, managing the business mission area portfolio, and doubling down on cattle drive. Beth?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Beth Caswell. I am the Director of IT Portfolio Management. I don't really want the mic in front of my face. Of IT Portfolio Management, and within that is management of the business mission area, which includes our acquisition, logistics, human resource management, installation and environments, and financial management portfolios. Before I get into the optimization that we're doing and the work that we're doing in the space, I really want to kind of level set with the current state of where we're at and some of the problems that we're facing, why we're trying to improve here. So we are currently doing a lot of amazing work within the BMA. We have incredible partnerships with folks that are working hard on delivering capabilities to sailors and Marines every single day. And I certainly want to encourage all of you to go and talk with our partners in PEO MLB that'll be around all week so you can learn more about that. But strategically and holistically from a portfolio perspective, CIO and we think we can do better. There's a lot of organizational things we can do better. So our current situation, as we're managing the BMA, we're very isolated, we're very stovepiped in what we're doing. We have stovepiped governance, stovepiped processes, .mlpf processes, and stakeholder organizations. And really what that's causing is decentralized decision-making across IT investments, data management, process reengineering, training, et cetera. All of these portfolios have dependencies on one another and are interrelated, so we want to manage those more holistically. Over time, as we've gone through this, to be perfectly blunt, we have kind of lost track of what we're even trying to deliver, what problems we're trying to solve in some areas. We have lack of empowered functional sponsors, like Ms. Rathbun mentioned earlier. Maybe that was in the photo op, sorry. We've sort of gone down this path where we are IT focused instead of process focused, so that we are looking for IT solutions to solve our problems and not looking at the underlying process issues that are causing some of those problems. And we're having difficulty identifying opportunities for cross-functional organization or synergies. And then on top of that, we have inconsistent governance, not necessarily strategic governance, but that holistic, high-level governance. So In order to change that dynamic and to acquire capabilities at speed and scale, our North Star within this pillar is delivering business services that are seamlessly integrated, customer-centric, secure, economical, and audit-ready, which is a lot of goals, but I think we have a pretty good plan to get there. So first and foremost, Ms. Rathbun and I have been working on a business mission area strategy. Some folks in the room have probably seen that. Right now, we don't really have that strategic guidance that all of our portfolio should be driving to, which is kind of an issue. So within that strategy, we're really focused on 5 areas: governance, people, processes, technology, and data. And those sound very broad, kind of like going faster, right? So specifically within their governance, we want to look at this holistic governance model, treating this portfolio as a holistic entity and not quite as stovepiped. We're looking at standing up governance that consolidates a lot of bodies that currently exist, working together with FM&C and RD&A. We can start combining investment reviews, gate reviews, program reviews, all the things in one body, so we're all hearing the same thing at the same time. Also, hopefully the program offices don't have to brief 47 people 47 different times, which will take some pressure off of them. Within our people area, Ms. Rathbun mentioned holding our functionals just as responsible as the PEO. Our functionals, in most cases, are responsible for business process reengineering and a lot of our requirements, which are the foundation for the acquisition that we're delivering. We want our functionals and our PEOs, our acquisition folks, to work hand in hand moving forward, because we're all in this delivering capabilities to sailors and Marines. It's not an either or. We should be working together on that. Within our processes, we've talked about focusing more on our enterprise architecture. We have delivered a business enterprise architecture that is up and running. A lot of folks have been leveraging that, but we want to stay focused on that. We want to leverage industry standards in our BPR. Like I said, our functionals should be looking at shifting our processes to industry standards, not adjusting our modern IT back to legacy processes that we're using. When we get to technology, obviously we want to use modern, user-friendly, auditable technology. There's technology out there that our sailors and Marines want. Our IT can do anything for us. We need to really focus on those solid requirements and processes to leverage that and have good user experiences, put the best things we can in our sailor and Marines' hands. And then within data, we've made a lot of great strides within the BMA this year, particularly within reporting, working hand in hand with DoD CIO on that. But certainly can improve our management, set data standards across our portfolios, and provide visibility into that for senior decision making. All of this leads us to an approach that we're taking, and we've heard this a lot with enterprise services and other things, the buy once, use often. We have limited resources across the department. As we're making large investments in some of these IT solutions, we want to be able to leverage those to the maximum extent possible. So we've talked about an ERP first, ERP-centric approach. This does not mean ERP only. There are a lot of things that ERP solutions can do for us, but there are certain things that maybe other technologies can do better. So it's not ERP only, but if we are investing in that, we want that to be our central transaction engine across the BMA. So like I said, where it makes sense, you can leverage other IT solutions, but everything should anchor and tie back to that central transaction engine just for process standardization and auditability purposes. We think that approach is going to drive a lot of needed process technology and data improvements across this area. And then when we talk about outcomes, which Justin loves to talk about outcomes all the time, what are we doing if we're not producing outcomes for folks? Improved readiness, giving warfighters what they need, warfighters and their families in this case, when you're talking HRM, giving them what they need, when and where they need it, anywhere in the world. Obviously, there's going to be cost savings as we're getting these modernization efforts online. We can start cattle driving the legacy efforts, which is very near and dear to my heart. Better informed decision-making for our senior leaders, obviously improve customer experience, and then what everyone is focused on leading into 2026 and 27, which is auditability across the department.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate that. And I appreciate you referencing dependencies. I meant to really foot stomp that earlier, right? Dependencies in a complex environment are crazy important. You got to understand what will happen if you change this thing over here, because second and third order effects, as most people in this room understand better than most, can be really brutal when you're not thinking through those things. And so in that vein, we're going to shift over and have Art talk to us about Spectrum, which is kind of the king of all dependencies when it comes to our business, because we don't trail glass behind ships or behind Humvees in the field. So, Art, if you could talk a little bit about where we are with Spectrum.
Yes, Mr. Tanner. And first, I'd like to thank Ms. Rathman. I know one of the key aspects of prioritizing Spectrum is critical really to the naval mission, and without us looking at it, we're under a whole new world today, new world from strategic communications and our ability to really talk about one area. When we talk about warfighting, we talk about strategic, operational, and tactical, and essentially Spectrum is at the strategic level. You look at how do we leverage Spectrum, it's being discussed at a delegation level at the World Radio Conference, at a legislative level every day. So those foundations of how do we do more with less concepts are really becoming a reality when we talk about Spectrum. So what is that strategic message? So you'll hear me harp about strategic messaging. What is it that is important to us as it relates to our weapon systems and communication systems? How do we protect what we have and optimize it? All those foundations are very critical to our naval mission globally. What does that really mean at the end of the day? What it means is industry is looking to do what we've been doing for many years. If you look at our allied and U.S. respects how we use Spectrum, we harmonized our Spectrum so we can deploy in anywhere in the country or in the world within 3 days. That doesn't exist. You have 150 different countries that use Spectrum differently, and you have to coordinate it differently. So I can go to any location in the world, and our systems have to have the ability to maneuver in that space. What does that mean? The culture that we typically like to work under has to change. Building that maneuver space, building that legacy to future capability. And if I can use JTRS as the example, JTRS was that big thing that could throw money at it, it'll never fail. We all know today that we threw a lot of money to that joint tactical radio system and it failed. So that foundation is how do we build those interfaces from legacy to future capabilities at small scale, allowing us to make small mistakes, small individual income mistakes that allows us to get to the greater good of building that legacy to future type capability. With that, we get agile weapon systems, maneuver space across the spectrum. How do we really utilize that maneuver space? It's what Ms. Rathman articulated earlier. That enterprise to tactical communication capability has to exist in order for our spectrum to be always ready, always available. Until we start describing it from an always ready, always available type capability, we'll never get there. So re-architecting that component from tactical to enterprise and always available is going to change the way we think about things. But if you consider what is being done in Ukraine right now, just from a small unmanned system type capability, we know it's a reality and it's going to change the aspect of how we do business. But we have to start having those hard discussions across the organization because it's real. We talk about all the unmanned systems that are occurring. Sightings within the United States tells us the culture is changing and we have to be prepared. So with that, I say the most important piece to this is leveraging industry, working with academia, other federal industry partners and all its components. And lastly, getting our communication strategy straight so we talk about how important it is to weapon systems and communication systems for the Department of Navy and having the Naval Global Force of Readiness.
Thanks, Art. Yeah, it's just super important. People, like, we talked earlier about things that aren't necessarily sexy, right? This is one of those things that is squarely in that category, but until you really get into it and understand it, you don't understand how important it is. So I appreciate everything you're doing about that. So with this, we're going to pivot just a little bit because we've talked all about the things that empower and enable, right? And you know, being an IT operations kind of a person, right? We think in terms of confidentiality, integrity, availability. All of that was about essentially availability, making sure that we can get capability out to where it needs to be. Well, we're going to pivot a bit and talk about those first two things, confidentiality and integrity, because the secure pillar is all about how we make sure that when the information gets there, it's secure, it's trusted, we can do what we need to with it, and our warfighters know that it's protected. So with that, Tony, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit more about the secure pillar.
Well, thank you. Again, I'm Tony Plater. I am the Don Sissel, which is a really great job. I want to thank Ms. Rathbun. I think, when I listened to this morning, sense of urgency. I think we have a lot of great things that are going on. I'm going to talk about those and some of the accomplishments, talk a little about the challenges, and I'm going to push forward with what's next. But I think the key, as we said, it is the urgency of how we relook what we do, how we change what we do to rise to the operational tempo we need it to be at, and how we support the warfighter. Because for me, as I've always said, cybersecurity, risk management, they're enablers. We don't want those to be top layer topics. We want to be able to enable folks to do their job, to bring capabilities to the force, to enable them at speed. So when we talk many times about RMF and all these topics, we're talking about how do we bring capability to the force. And Ms. Rathbun, working closely with her, that's what we focused on a lot. How do we innovate and improve processes? So we've talked about earlier, as Ms. Rathbun said, part of the secure portfolio is the zero trust implementation. We've talked about that, scaling cyber readiness, securing the defense industrial base, because we have information out there and they have technological innovation that we want to be protected. So that's what makes it important. I'm going to ask you to please join us tomorrow as we moderate a fireside chat between our Don CIO, Ms. Rathbun, and the Principal Cyber Advisor, Ms. Anne Marie Schumann. They're going to talk in depth about this new thing that we added to ISV 2.0, which is managed cybersecurity as a shared capability portfolio. So please join that. So just as Ms. Rathbun alluded to this morning, cyber readiness, moving from that compliance to a more dynamic model that emphasizes continuous monitoring, security validation, leading to ultimately currency, and bringing capability to the force, right? How do I enable to make sure that you can get that capability, that we can get it in a risk-acceptable fashion and get that capability deployed so that we can ultimately be ahead of the competing forces and the adversary? So this is important. We've talked about we need to shift left, that's cybersecurity embedded throughout the life cycle, but starting at the design, having the requirements in the design. So what are the challenges? Culture, transforming a culture where we've been relying on a static process, a static approach. So that's where we need your help. That's where we'll continue to communicate about what we're trying to do. Integrating cybersecurity requirements early and seamlessly into the acquisition cycle. So thanks to Damon Hoffines, Megan McCain, Will Bush for their outstanding support as we published the strategic intent that we had out. We've been partnering with NAVAIR and NAVC, conducted 6 pathfinders through their partnership, enabling ATO under the cyber readiness processes, working with the Marine Corps, redoing an authorization at mid-cycle and achieving it there. The Navy, threat-informed risk management, TIMRA, showing how we can focus resources on high-threat vulnerabilities, adversarial assessments, Navy Blue Team, outstanding work, deploying being able to validate our security posture on NMCI and working to do it across other platforms. Cyber Ready, convening us off-site, 40-plus stakeholders to look at where the gaps are in C2. DevSecOps comes to mind, Ed Kuko and the work he's doing with RAISE, the Rapid Assessment Corporate Software Engineering. Why is it important? We need our DevSec pipelines to be certified. And we're actually leading in DoD in that those pipelines produce applications who already have the security ready for the environment to go into production, and they already inherit the ATO for the in-production environment. So what's next, and how do we get there when you say, what are we doing in cyber ready? So we're getting ready to release additional intent guidance incorporating lessons learned. We're already working with the Navy and Marine Corps on our CONMON proof concepts so that we can get that continuous monitoring the way we need it to be. As we talked about earlier, looking at the gate review processes, how do we establish that whole cyber readiness, cyber survivability, have that as part of the gate review process. And as Ms. Rathbun talked about, the whole cyber risk management role. Taking that, zero trust makes too much sense, right? We already been doing many of those things, but now we're doing it in a much more concerted fashion. So we've talked about data-centric is where we need to be. Data, 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 not network model. Ms. Rathbun talked about the whole idea of data, understanding our data, tagging our data, attribute-based access control. So everything is about the data, so why our model for security has to be about the data as well. So a whole data-centric model versus a network-centric model. So we talked about the accomplishments, we talked about the 558 users going over to flank speed, how flank speed was assessed by independent assessment, and how well it did. Take that same model and approach and how we move it to other platforms. We also developed the Zero Trust Metrics Collection System. So Don, the data strike team, did an excellent job with that, and they were able to DoD like that and also adopted that. So as we talk about all these things we're doing, we also had the Zero Trust Tactical Afloat pilot. We also hear later this week, you hear Dr. Jasper from the Naval Postgraduate School. He'll be talking about IT versus OT as we get after there. So ensuring all of these things coupled with what we're doing in the security defense industry base, we'll be working toward how we can improve wherever that data is stored, how we can make sure it's secure. So many thanks to Damon Hopkins, the Deputy Don CIO, Jennifer Harper, Pete Zymuk, John Bunkle, Dave Boker in doing Zero Trust, as well as Tammy Loki. And I think we're getting after it.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. Now we're going to pivot, and we're going to talk about what you do with all this data. We've mentioned it a lot this morning about, we're setting the conditions through Optimize and Secure to unleash the data that we have so that we can actually make good decisions. And so Alicia's going to talk us through a little bit of the Decide pillar.
So we heard Ms. Rathbun say this morning, securely move data from anywhere to achieve decision advantage. Data, data maneuverability, analytics, and AI are all major areas of focus for this and really critical components to assure that decision advantage. So to support the warfighter and drive toward achieving readiness on Jan 1, 2027, if that's what we're working towards, Dawn data must be accessible and it must be trustworthy to increase that lethality, to increase our velocity, and to achieve mission readiness when we need it. And so part of the things we're thinking about for that are enterprise to edge and then edge to enterprise. And I know you all could throw tomatoes on that and how we're doing that now, but we're working to build that strategy to make that more cohesive, make it easier, and to be able to really build upon the successes we've had. And we know that doesn't come alone. John CIO is not going to do that on our own. We need the partnerships that we've already established. I can look out across the whole crowd and see vendors that we partner with, warfare centers that we partner with, other PEOs that are leading strategy, into N6 with the blueprint. We see people moving in the data space, and we need to come together in a cohesive way to continue to move that space forward. We're starting and need to continue to get better at treating data as a strategic asset. So it's one of the many strategic assets we have to continue to be a more lethal force. And then enabling our analytics and AI, and that includes our generative AI. Now, I'll talk more about that on our Wednesday session in the morning to talk about how our strategy with Gen AI, and analytics in general are planning out for the next year and looking forward into the future. But obviously, those things are what we need to make use of the data that we have into an understandable and usable format that people can actually make decisions from. For us, and you can see on the slide, hopefully, Vaultus is both a principle and an outcome for our data. How many people know what Vaultus stands for if you don't have the slide in front of you? Okay, we're getting better. Stephanie and I are really focusing in on the accessible and the trustworthy as we work towards all of them. Vaultus is foundational underpinning for all the things we do under the Decide pillar. So data, analytics, AI, having that verified, having the accessibility, having the trustworthiness, make it useful, make it do what it's supposed to do. Unfortunately for us, data is a life cycle. It's not just you start at step 1, end at step 10, and you've done it. You've done data. It continues to loop back on itself, and so it's something that we're continually going to have to address. We can't do it one time and be done. It'll be an over and over process that we'll continue to build on. And you'll see us working towards that this year, specifically in our comprehensive data governance space. Stephanie Tutko has done an amazing job at reformulating our data governance. She's going to speak on that tomorrow morning in the data track. To show you the intricacies and the details, how she's made processes that help people from bottom echelons be able to push concerns up to the very top when they're not getting things through. We need a space where people can push those concerns, whether you're a vendor, whether you're academia, whether you're a military member, to be able to say, hey, I can't get what I need to do via data. Can you help move this forward? Can you help break through what feels like a barrier to us? So Stephanie will talk more about that. Then I want to talk about having the right data available at the right time. We can't do what we need to do if that's not there. And it obviously, just like faster, that seems like a basic capability, but it's a lot harder said than done. We want to transition away from our siloed, heterogeneous, disparate environments and move to ones where successes are scaled, successes are repeatable, and they're reused at mission speed. So you've heard my other members or colleagues up here speak about divesting to invest. The cattle drive space of treating them like cattle and not pets, unfortunately, but being able to enable via that. We want to be looking at our enterprise services. We have the team that's running enterprise services is doing a phenomenal job, and enabling that in our data space as well as our other spaces to move things faster, to move things more forward, and to make use of our investments the best way we possibly can. And then finally, to achieve strategic advantage, we must transform the Dawn into a data-fluent organization. So our workforce that consumes data effortlessly into execution. We want it to be easy to use data. We don't want it to feel like a burden to be able to turn to analytics or to AI. We want that at your hand, as easy as Word, as easy as Excel, as easy as email, so that you're using analytics and making data-informed decisions. We want to be implementing governance and technology that really promote data integration and sharing across the spectrum of our Department of Navy organization. And then we want to be increasing training, career paths, upskilling, and investing in our data education, which leads into our workforce team. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Alicia. Appreciate that. And as she mentioned, this leads very naturally into our final point of discussion under ISV 2.0, and that's workforce. Jane talked earlier about the innovation cross-cut, so we're not going to focus on that here. She had a chance to walk through that earlier. But we've got Emily up here to talk about the workforce aspect, because at the end of the day, it's about the people doing the work, right? And so understanding what they need, how we're going to train people on how to use these tools. You've heard the word culture like 100 times already, and you're going to hear it 100 more today. It's the hardest part of this, right? And all the cliches about culture eating strategy for breakfast and all that other kind of stuff all hold true. You guys know that. But Emily's going to talk about how we're getting after this from a structured manner and how we're partnering across both the Navy and the Marine Corps to make it happen. Emily?
Thank you. Everyone's stealing my thunder. The key component here is people. That's our Northstar. We need a capable cyber workforce. It's critical to achieving information superiority. We're working to build a world-class cyber workforce where people can unleash their full potential. The road to that is ensuring that any of this that we're doing here, we can do that by identifying what this workforce consists of. We have the Defense Cyberspace Workforce Framework that we are utilizing in collaboration with DoD CIO, their requirement to code our workforce. We've been in year 2 of the transition of that. We've identified this workforce, but it's a continuous process. As we've just recently had the CDAO come on, they have their own work role codes and qualifications that they want to set forth. So we're constantly looking at what our workforce consists of and making sure that we have those people in place with the critical skills to do the work. And then we have to trust it. We have to trust what we have coded this workforce as, so that we know those are the critical work role codes that we need to put the training and the recruitment, the incentivizing towards to make sure that we have them. And then we have to look into our policy, making sure that this is executable down at the command level, making sure that things that we pump out or that DoD pumps out as part of their Fulcrum strategies or as the cyber workforce implementation, that it's something that can actually be done at the command level. Like they have the funding to support the training and development of their workforce. And so we have to be agile, flexible, and responsive to whatever the change in the environment is, whatever technology we have to get that, that training in place for this workforce. So we've done a lot of close collaboration with HR and Manpower, one, to set the coding in our authoritative databases to make sure that we've accurately coded them. And then whatever we're putting into as qualification requirements, these folks are able to obtain them and maintain them. It's not just having that foundational knowledge. It's that on-the-job training. It's that, do you know how to perform your job? If we change the technology, if we upgrade something, what type of training do you need in order to do that? And so it's a constant evolving thing in being able to have this workforce in place. And like Ms. Rathbun said, it's not just the cyber workforce. Even though it is the Defense Cyberspace Workforce Framework, it has expanded out. There's 7 different elements now. And so a lot of folks, it's hard for them to see, where do I fit into this DCWF? But you are there. You're either an enabler, you're supporting the work of this, you're helping with the decision-making of the cyber, or you're doing the data and the AI, you're doing the effects, you're doing that operation, that offensive cyber. You're somewhere in there and able to help and meet the mission of the warfighter. So with us, we want to make sure that we're recruiting, we're developing, we're retaining, and that we're managing a mission-ready, modern, highly proficient cyber workforce.
All right, thanks, Emily. And I'll just foot stomp some of those key points, because we as a department have always taken a look at our workforce in a very structured way, right? You know, I came up through the Navy, and we had our designators and our NECs and all these things, and it was a you know, the manual had it all laid out, and we knew exactly where everybody fit. And those things didn't change very often. And we're in a world now where those codes are probably going to be changing in some cases monthly, because the technology is changing that fast, and the things people have to know are going to change that fast. I mean, seriously, it's like a structured methodology is a great thing, but one of the biggest lessons learned I think I've gathered over the last 5 years is that, you know, as soon as you think you know, okay, well, that's exactly what that person needs to know, and this is exactly how that's going to work, some new thing's going to come along and take that in a totally different direction. Right. So if we understand up front that change is constant, then we can develop a system like the team is working on that accounts for that and is able to effectively manage the change as it goes through. And this is really hard for folks. It's like, okay, I thought I knew what my job was, but you just pulled the rug out from under me. It's a cultural shift, and helping our workforce understand this change in mindset, I think, is going to be super important, and the team's doing a lot of great work there. So thanks, Emily. All right. So I challenged you at the beginning, come up with some questions, right? We got started a little early, so we have about a half an hour, right? And I know, I see you, Nick. Anyway, so hopefully you've been taking notes. Hopefully you've been thinking about these things. We're going to start with my good friend Commander Goddard in the back, who I'm sure has an awesome question for us. Go for it.
All right, thanks, Barry. Thanks to everyone for being on the panel and being very open and direct. So been a part of this Navy team for like the last 3 years about how we've adopted innovative capabilities in order for us to move fast and actually defeat the threats that we get beat up on pretty much daily. So one of the things I wanted to ask is most of our combat power lies in the DIB when it comes to information superiority. And one of the challenges that we have is how do we have these partners that are not part of the primes that end up getting in the way of the small offices and small businesses in order for us to truly innovate. And my question really is, from Barry to Justin to Tony to Beth, is with CMMC, I view it as handcuffs, another compliance-based framework in order for us to say we have done something as a DoD. How does that not impact what we are attempting to do inside the Navy ecosystem? And then having a third-party vendor certify it, it looks like it's just going to add more cost and prevent or create barriers to entry for these small innovative companies to go from WAM 3 to 2 as an example.
That is a fantastic question to lead off with. right? No softballs from the commander daughter, right? I am going to let Tony talk about the specifics on that, but I'm going to start off by saying that our intent from the Don CIO's perspective is to unleash that innovation at every level, right? Policy is our job at the level at which we sit. We've had great success over the last few years when we run into a policy which has noble intent, but the letter of that policy is actually counter to that intent. We've had really good success partnering with DoD CIO and others to get exceptions to start with so that we can continue to move and then eventually change those policies over time. And we've seen that play out over the last 3 years. And it's not just about saying it, it's about showing it, right? So, the intent of CMMC is a good intent, right? I was around when it was first brought forward as an opportunity after some fairly significant losses in the industry based on cyber intrusions. And so the idea is not a bad idea. The way we're doing it, as my good friend Mike Galbraith would say, is we're DoDing out of this, right? And we're ending up with another compliance-based framework that, again, noble intent, but it's going to get it. It's too big, it's too bloated. It's trying to solve everything at that level gets you in a place where now you're actually part of the problem. So what we're going to do, and I'll let Tony talk about some more details on this, is again focus on our engagement with the DIB, our partnership, that sort of badgeless view of the world to say, we're in this together because we can't do it without you, but we need you to step your game up, and then here's some ways to do that. So Tony, you want to talk about some of those initiatives?
So I think the key is, as you said, how do we get them to step their game up? So if a step back, what I mentioned was, it is extremely important for us to work with them. It is extremely important because, one, they house many of our data. Two, if they don't house our data, they have technological innovation that we don't want to fall into the adversary's hand. So through those partnerships, we seek to highly influence what they're doing, share lessons learned, and share some of our approaches to doing cybersecurity and maintaining our networks. Just like we want to share what we're doing with Zero Trust, what we're doing with flank speed. We want to share that so they can also learn. So I won't comment too much directly on CMMC. It's driven top level, but I would say it does fall in the same category as we seek to illuminate the DIB. We want to understand what their risks they're accepting and what it looks like from a vulnerability perspective. So we are also using other tools to illuminate the DIB, such as some of the work that NAVC is doing and Scorecard, Blue Voyant, and other tools, all focus on understanding and illuminating what does their security posture look like, all about the outcome of protecting information, protecting technological innovation. We are very sensitive to small business. That's why the Don CIO works very closely with the small business office, the CIBR office. All of these are to look at how we can help them. We've also ran a Blue Cyber effort to directly offer webinars, education on how they can meet DoD's goal to satisfy those controls. So I think from our perspective, there is a heavy lift when we start talking about when we put out that these are all the cybersecurity controls and these are all the things they must not do to comply. But I think from our perspective, we step in to help them understand, meet, and address those challenges. We are also working very closely with NSA to take the free, no-cost tools that they offer, such as the proxies, such as the attack surface management, take all these tools, offer it to our DIB partners at no cost in order to achieve that one common goal of helping them to protect information and decrease, mitigate risk. We work very closely, what we're doing now, and in fact, we're working closely with talking with the Army and with PEO Digital about their cloud compliant offerings that we could potentially offer to the DIB or show the DIB how to implement. Army is looking very closely at creating a CMMC compliant cloud, which means it meets the intent, but at a reduced cost, and with those protections, the DIB can reside in those spaces and offer the protections needed. Somewhere else we're taking a close look at is when we talk about subtenancy. Same thing we tend to do today. They inherit the same protections, but they pay the bill. So we're looking at all these ways of how we enable small business and mid-sized business to meet our intent of protecting their information. So when we combine all this together with meeting with DIB, we actually held bi-weekly sessions with about 14 primes, where I meet with all the CISOs for 14 primes. And this is the exact same thing we talk about. How do we meet our outcomes? What strategies? How can the Department of Navy help represent some of the ideas coming from our DIB partners, those larger prime companies, and how we try to influence them as well to offer those protections and to work with the small businesses. And through all of these partnerships, I think this is how we're trying to make a difference and how we're trying to lessen the burden for small business.
I think the challenge, though, Tony, it's the way they're doing it is 20 to 25% pass-through, and they're crushing small businesses. I have 4 vendors right now that cannot meet CMMC, and they will not be able to do business with the U.S. Navy.
So let's talk to them, let's understand that so that we can elevate that information up to the leadership at the DoD level. Ms. Beavers did not want to talk about CMMC this morning because she feels as the new administration comes in, there may be some changes happening to it. But bottom line up front, cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility and accountability, and if you want to do business with the government, then you've got to take into account that piece of it, and if you can't do it on your own, then let's have a conversation. As Tony said, Army is already moving out on cloud. That is something that we have talked about doing for at least 2 years. Jack Summers is leading an effort with the naval aviation industry partners, talking about how to do better information sharing and cybersecurity. We don't go it alone, we don't leave people behind, and so where small companies are having a hard time meeting it, let's talk about how we get pilots going, where we can bring them into our ecosystem and use our fabric to support them. Over.
And we're looking for participants in those pilots. We have openings, so please make sure I get that information. How can I help?
Yeah, so real quick on that, historically, for the last 15 years, the number of partners that the Navy, Department of Navy has worked with has gone down every year for the last 15 years, until 2 years ago when we started working with them more hands-on, and it's gone up. So we've reversed this trend over the last 17 years in the last 2 years. It's been a lot more manual labor and work. Break. From a policy perspective, policy is supposed to improve outcomes. Not every policy does that. We have 12 times in the last year and a half waived a policy or got an exception to a policy because we had enough data, mostly from industry, some from government, where they said that, hey, looks like this policy is not actually meeting its intent, right? Imagine that. And so where we can get enough inputs and work with each's, data plus stories allow us to influence this as much as possible. And so where that can happen, no one wants to crush small businesses. This is why we have the Innovation Adoption Kit. This is why we have more pilots and teammates than we have in the last decade. And so I think looking at this from a data-driven perspective with specifics has allowed us to turn the tide. We'd like to do more of that.
Great. All right. Let's move on to the next question. Hello, Bruce.
Hi, how you doing? Bruce Hidaka-Gordon with Nywick Atlantic. This is a question about workforce. There's a little bit of turbulence in the workforce right now. I'm not sure why, but it's really critical, I think, that we look beyond the cyber coding per position description and look at the individuals as well. So the question is, what type of tool do you intend to use, or are we looking at to catalog the capabilities of each individual person within our workforce so that when we need them, we can get to them and their skill set, even if they're not in the position that maybe they're hired to be in right now?
That's a great question. And I will also plug that we're having a brief on training and development of the cyber workforce that will speak to this. But what we are looking at is, right now we have the rollout of Waypoints, which is an enterprise learning management system for the civilians. We're also looking into bringing the military into that, seeing what content we have available for the training for this workforce. with that, it's not just setting up a list of trainings and saying, go out and do this, but doing that talent development, looking at what are folks' skills and potential that they can have, curating that so that we are able to see if we've got a gap here, a critical work role gap, and somebody is proficient in doing that. It's not just what they were coded as, what billet and what position they're supposed to be, but what could they also perform. So if there is a gap here, or there's a critical place that we say, hey, we need to go in and shift, do we have anybody proficient in this right now that we could ask to come and do this so that we can be able to be agile, flexible, and responsive to whatever's going on? So we're leveraging what we have with our LMS and then being able to expand that. We're looking to do a functional community site where the cyber workforce can go to this and be able to see what type of training is available and what ways can they develop themselves or even show what they're currently qualified in, and for us to be able to catalog that and be able to use that for the workforce.
So it sounds like the intent is for the LMS to also become like our talent management system, so all-in-one in waypoints.
I will say, yes, potentially all-in-one in waypoints, and if it's not within waypoints, where will it be? And that's exactly where we want to go. So it could be a combination of two different things, but yes, being able to use the LMS to its full potential as well.
Awesome.
Briefly on that, you were asking a tools question. Skills matter a ton and experience matters a ton. Results matter. And so there's a lot of learning by doing happening, specifically when people lean forward and take an opportunity like pilot lead, looking around. And so where we have folks who are acquiring skills through execution, this is a great way to, anyone here has had like a transformative task or action. Like that is one of the best ways to build this workforce in kind of an exponential or asymmetric time.
And again, I appreciate the question. I will say one last thing. You have to balance, there's this tendency that we have to say, oh, that person has that skill, we're going to go put them to do that. And Emily said this very well. We're going to ask them to go and do it that way, right? And for the most part, we're all hard chargers, A-type people, right? We want to go do. We keep saying go faster, right? But culture has to be a balance, right? And so making sure that we capture these things, we understand these experiences, and that gives people opportunities. And they can seize those opportunities when it's the right time for them, but we don't want to, take a complete like assignment mindset. Like we're not detailers here, we're not doing that stuff, at least not the civilian side of the house. But as we go through, the more opportunities we can put out to people, I think we're going to see the workforce sort of self-generate in a lot of these places. I've noticed that in my industry time, that once you start throwing out the opportunities, the ones that are really hard chargers just bubble to the top. But first you got to let them know, right? And so the whole point is, start targeting that messaging to people that have that experience and see where you can grow. But thanks for the question, Bruce. Appreciate it. Hello, Everett.
Hey, good morning, Barry. Panel, thank you so much for your comments. I'm Everett Hayes. I'm from Leidos. My question kind of dovetails into his, and it's on workforce. Do you have in mind, and I know that this is a difficult thing when we start talking about retention of the workforce and having that experience to grow. Do you have in mind a certain mix that you look for, that you're going to be looking for when you talk about government civilians, military, and contractor or industry partners that might be able to step in and fill some of those gaps or voids that are caused or created when you can't get that expertise or someone is leaving to go get a better opportunity? Do you have in your mind a mix of those groups of people?
So what we have been using is that Defense Cyberspace Workforce Framework in order to code the workforce and understand what we have. Currently, we're doing that with our civilian and military. So we're coding that to say what position requirements do we have? What type of work is being performed? There's now 73 different work role codes. So we're getting very granular in the type of task, knowledge, skills, and abilities that are being performed. As far as what the right mix is and bringing the contract workforce into that, that is something that we'll definitely be doing as we roll out the qualification and management plan. Understanding what would be the qualification requirements when the contractor's DFARS clause update, what they have to do when it comes to meeting those qualifications. And then again, like I was saying, looking at the critical skills that we need across the commands. There's different mission sets all over the place. So what do they need? And when does it need the right, mix of can a civilian do this or must this be military? We do know within certain work role codes, we've seen that military is more so performing this, or the certain role and responsibility can only be done by government, by a civilian. So we definitely play into that, and as a part of Cyber Ready, that's another thing that we're looking at. What are those types of roles that we need to be able to see done, if it's done by military or civilian, or if we can have the contractor workforce to do it? So it's definitely on the horizon for us to take a look at as we're coding and going through coding the workforce, understanding what we've got and the type of roles that are being performed, and then what do we need to do as far as qualifications.
And the push to go CS recently, so government-owned, government-operated, contractor-supported, has produced accelerated results, and so that's something that I think we'll look to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, and again, really good question. The key here being, if I could summarize a little bit of what Emily said there, is that there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all here. Like, it just does not exist. And so understanding and having a framework that, by which a person who is looking to get something done can say, okay, well, I'm trying to build a team. How can I build this team, right? And giving them examples of how others have done it will help them get started, right? And then they can adjust around the edges to figure out the right mix of people to get the job done. But, the sort of baseline work roles that only government people can do that, contractors can do that, whatever. Okay, got it. That's table stakes. But then as you move up, you can work within those boundaries quite a bit. So I think as the team's going through and learning and iterating on this, we're going to get tools in the hands of these team leads, these program leads, these folks who are responsible to deliver things. That'll help them build the right kind of teams with the right talent. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. All right. Next up.
How's it going? My name is Danny Bethke. I love everything about the ISV 2.0. I think moving faster is definitely a direction that we need to go. I think from the secure and decide perspective, I did kind of have a question about reciprocity. Are we looking at potentially reviewing if there's any area for improvement in utilizing reciprocity, as well as being able to include more platforms within reciprocity?
So I'm going to hand that straight to Tony, but I will say specifically that reciprocity is there for a reason, right? And our perspective on things as we shift out of compliance and more to readiness, right? Cyber Ready is about readiness. The same way that we train our ships to fight and be ready, we have to train everybody and evaluate ourselves to be ready in this domain. That's the intent, right? An ATO on a shelf is not ready. Right? You have to assess yourself all the time. So reciprocity is a part of that, but keep in mind that just because somebody else has an ATO on a static basis every 3 years does not mean that I necessarily am going to trust that they're really secure, right? So, sure.
Wow. You must know my boss was asking about that. So matter of fact, just recently my boss asked me, for a particular system, he said, did reciprocity really work? Right? Were we able to apply reciprocity? So I'm putting together a complete answer for her. But to go into it now, reciprocity is about reusing the work that's already been done, right, for all those efficiencies and effectiveness that we can accomplish. But in many cases, sometimes reciprocity assumes that you are taking the way the system was operating in one environment for that data, for that user owner. And if we can lift and shift that to operate in the exact same manner, then there's no other work to be done. But what we find in some cases more so is that we're taking a part, or we're taking that software application, but we are using it for a different group of folks, for different data in a different environment, and that work must be done. So we must distinguish between that, and we must manage expectations. That's the way we do it. What are we looking at is just like we said, how do we innovate past that, meet operational requirements, and how can we make it better? And that's what we're trying to work on. So I admit there are far fewer cases where we had hoped to do full reciprocity than we have. But there are many cases where we do work specifically with the AOs, and they do take any testing that has been completed previously, any documentation that we can leverage. It's just that delta that we should be focusing on. And when we're not focusing on that data, that delta, then we're not doing it to the most effective and efficient way, and we need to do better.
And the more specific up front, like the sooner that's like the differences are caught and articulated, the better off. Like if that gets into the paperwork shuffle, then that adds time.
Yeah. Again, just to wrap it up, context matters, right? It's what am I using the system for, who's using it, in what environment, all those details, right? It's not just, oh, it's the same thing, go, right? We're not going to operate that way.
Now, if you have a specific challenge in mind that you want to get with me after, we're here to help.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. All right, the mic is open. Oh, there we go.
Hey, everybody. My name's Al Lucchini. I'm a IT strategic planner supporting NavAir. I have a question about quantum computing. I was wondering if the panel has anything that they can share regarding the Navy's thoughts on our approaches on quantum computing and that evolution in the technology. Thank you.
Excellent. That's not a hard question at all.
Awesome.
Yes.
Within the Horizon model, Horizon 3 is where a majority of our quantum computing efforts are right now. And so like we're in touch with, frankly, most of the players who are spending billions of dollars on quantum. The likely first applications that we have in Horizon 2 right now are a component around quantum, so quantum resistant encryption. This is something that we teed up, got into the NDAA, and then now are doing some early stage piloting. As it relates to alternative PNT or like the sensor work, we're in touch with the program offices within ONR, NRL, and DARPA to figure out how we can pull that through. And then from a commercial perspective, we meet with and are looking for opportunities to make use of, those are really capital intensive investments, so other people's investments so that we can show how it makes a difference. Now, quantum is like an exaggerated version in this particular way of what you see from a product market fit perspective. There's a lot that has to happen up front for them to have like a specific domain to impact or disrupt. And so we're trying to be, like we are everywhere, but even more so, squarely focused on the business case. Because like what will often happen with some like a set of technology this big is they'll say like, hey, can you help us get through the valley of death? Well, we need something to turn off or something to be positively impacted because we can't pay a green tax there. And so to get more from Horizon 3 into Horizon 2, we really need to solidify like specific Department of Navy business cases.
Yeah, the use case matters, right? And so I'll piggyback on the Horizon 2 that Justin was mentioning in there around quantum resistant encryption, right? You can't shake a stick right now with security vendors that quantum resistant. They're all saying that, right? They're all and right now we've actually are standing up a team specifically to make sure that we are managing that space carefully, right? Because it's fine for someone to release an algorithm and say, there you go, that's quantum resistant, right? That's like 10% of the work. The 90% of the work is how you implement that, right? And the implementations are not cookie cutter, and they are certainly not one size fits all. They are all context and mission sensitive. And so if you're looking at deploying that kind of a technology, you really have to understand what it's going to be used for, in what environments, through what methods and mechanisms. And so we're actually standing up a team, the NDAA language that he mentioned, to evaluate those kinds of technologies as they're coming in the board to see what is your implementation strategy? How are you applying it to this use case or that use case or that use case? And in most of the places we've looked at so far, that we get a whole lot of, oh, well, we'll come back, right? Because no one has thought through to the actual implementation stage. And when you're at this level, if you haven't, then it's actually worse than the original.
So within Optimize, modernize the IE is extremely important. A modernized IE involves more quantum functionality and quantum resistant functionality, right? And so this is an area like all of the enterprise services where tailored use cases like win the day. if we can, the sooner that we can get to tailored use cases and enterprise service there, the better. And so we're just facilitating or unleashing or helping that adoption go faster.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to the board for sharing your guidance. Appreciate it.
All right, appreciate that. Nathan, go for it.
Hello. Yeah, I thought it was an open mic, so I figured I would maybe close with a softball. So my question for you and the team in general here is, with ISV 2 and the introduction of 3 either new or rebranded pillars, what bodies, like governance bodies, forums, or methodologies is the Don CIO staff using to ensure that 3 pillars do not become 3 stovepipes?
You call that a softball? What? No.
I know what you're doing, so I think, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, no, I appreciate that, Nathan. So the point that Nathan is making about frameworks becoming stovepipes and becoming their own worst enemies is a lesson I think we've all learned over the years. Everything starts with noble intent. Everybody's like, oh, this sounds great, we're going to all do this. And then we go off and do our work with our heads down, and we're not looking around at all these things. So I think, and I'll talk about a few of these. I'll let the team talk about where they're working specifically across the pillars to make sure that we're going forward. But in the end of the day, our existing governance forums where we're integrating Navy, Marine Corps, Department of the Navy, Secretariat level, all of the key players that have to get stuff done, we're injecting each of these aspects and these, I'll call them just questions up front, into all of those, right? So you don't, everybody's like, governance is great, right? But we got plenty. So the key is to use the forums that we have, places like on the Navy side in the Navy CIO Council where we talk to all of the commands out there that are just trying to get stuff done and inform them about how all this works and help, as I mentioned at the beginning, refine their decision space, right? So that when they have to make a call on something, instead of 50 choices, okay, no, really it's just 10 because these other ones don't really match what we're trying to get done. And it's a communication strategy with them, right? And there's plenty of task force net model on the Marine Corps side where we're bringing together lots and lots of different stakeholders and mission owners and everybody else like that and saying, okay, well, here's what we know, here's the options, let's make a good choice and let's move, right? And then everybody moves in the same direction. So at the end of the day, each of these pillars do not operate in a vacuum. They can't because they all are interdependent on each other, right? If you want to move data around, you've got to make it secure. It's got to be visible, accessible. It's got to be efficient and effective, or it just collapses under its own weight, et cetera, right? So if you want it to be successful and you want it to work, they all have to work together. And of course, with workforce underpinning the whole thing. So I'll open it to the panel if anybody has any other comments.
Briefly, numbers are the jet fuel. There's a lot of words, right? But it's a numbers time. It's an outcomes time. And so there aren't separate tracks because some decisions are straightforward. Some decisions have just way better impact, or some alternatives have way bigger impact than others. And so looking across all of those and saying, hey, what are the outcomes through this decision as we go through the Information Superiority Advisory Board? Like, how do you make a compelling numbers case? This is how we're letting vendors and partners come in and state a case that is just a much bigger deal than it used to be. Like policy, governance is a function of outcomes. And so when it comes down to, are we moving quick enough and in the right direction? Who's heard of DeepSeek? Raise your hand. Right? In 2 months. In 2 months, they made that progress, they're saying. And so, what have we all done in 2 months? So where we can use the mechanisms that exist, as Barry said, and show the difference that's being made, we will make faster, better decisions.
Go ahead. You can go ahead first.
Justin just said governance by doing, right? So, that's okay. Governance by doing, we are not going to try to upset the decision processes of the Navy and Marine Corps, but we are going to get involved in those decision processes. Catherine Cunningham, our head of resources, is very involved in the OpNav resourcing process. Why? Because we're trying to guide, shape, steer things that maybe have not been looked at by the OpNav world the way we need to look at them. So how do we influence inside the decision circles that exist today? One. Two, same people in multiple forums. And then the third one is getting strategic alignment. We had this great transport summit. It was the first time that OpNav, that the Marine Corps, that the Department of Navy, and the N9, and the Nav War Commander got together and talked about what unified transport should look like or should be. Like, we've got to have more of those conversations, but not necessarily have governance for governance sake. And so that's going to be critical to how we move forward.
And I could just comment, the managed cybersecurity as a shared capability portfolio, and much envisioned by Ms. Rathbun as well, is we need to be looking at these things more holistically across platforms, across silos. So it is meant to help drive where we are looking more holistically and pulling those things to a higher level to make sure we're approaching the most effective and efficient manner. And it's not about how do we do cybersecurity or secure in a vacuum.
I would like to add on too, within the business mission area, we have this thing, it's a blessing and a curse with Defense Business System Certification under Title 10, 2222. And we can hold business systems responsible for meeting certain requirements, right? So obviously, Nathan, you're very familiar with that because we work with our service partners in that. But as we're looking across our defense business systems, we're checking compliance against architecture. We're making sure they're leveraging enterprise services. They're implementing the right cyber techniques and implementing ICAM in a timely manner. We're getting into data compliance. Everyone up here affects how we're working in our business mission area space. So leveraging what we already have and communicating that not only out, but down as well through the services, I think is really important in helping keep us aligned on that.
All right. Next question.
Yes, good day. Dave Heath from NC Tams PAC. How do we align the moving fast of the new technologies, new capabilities, new systems with the correct realignment of the personnel resources in the operating field? All of our operating fields operate at the speed of Palm. You're operating at the speed of months. They don't align. And so what we're seeing at the operating sites over and over and over again is this constant change of evolution, changing the structure of the workforce requirements, the skill sets, the capabilities, and the quantities, right? So we're taking, personnel that are, message center operators and now expecting us to have that workforce evolve into system administrators, cyber defenders, firewall administrators. The technology is moving way faster than the personnel realignments. And so what we're seeing is this change happening so fast that the implementation, the fielding is happening 5, 6, 7 times faster than the readjustments of the workforce, and then POM never catches us up. So what are we doing to try and realign and get the fielding the capabilities aligned to the resource readjustments?
That is a fantastic question. I love that question, and I really appreciate you bringing that forward. Mentioned before, I come from the operational community. I know exactly what you're talking about. I was looking around the room as you were talking. I was like, where's Captain McGee? And where is Captain Pender, right? Because they are fighting that fight every day. I will say that on the Navy side of the house, because I'm much more familiar with that personally, there is a very significant and serious conversation happening right now with the Type Commander in this area. If you talk to, and Admiral Vernazza is going to be here this week at a bunch of panels. So I would challenge you to ask him that same question. And he will take it and he will tell you what he's trying to do. He has he's only been on the job a very few months, and he has taken a very, very hard look at this particular challenge, because at the end of the day, we don't have a choice. We talk about we have to go faster, right? The world's going to go faster whether we like it or not, right? These capabilities are going to evolve much faster than our traditional processes can handle. So we are going to have to take an entirely different approach to how we are executing the work at the operational edge, how we are training and effectively empowering our workforce to use those tools. The tools that we put out there have to be designed in such a way that we do not place undue burden on the people who have to operate them, right? And engineers are awesome, and I love engineers to death. I am one, right? But engineers design things to work, not design things to be operated for the most part, right? So you have to kind of keep pressing on the technical community to deliver something, and it gets a little bit back to what Ms. Beavers was talking about at the beginning, right? Does it scale? Part of scaling is, can you operate it in the field? She mentioned very specifically it has to be able to be sustained and maintained. That means operated day by day. So pushing something out to the edge that is the coolest whiz-bang thing ever, but can't be operated by the people we have in the field is a fail, right? So looking through the entire .ml-PFP cycle, part of that being manpower, right? Part of that being actual ConOp. How is this going to work? Who's going to be doing what pieces? Operational roles, tasks, all those things. It's table stakes in how we're going to be pushing things out if we're going to go fast. Because you can push the thing out there as fast as you want, but if it doesn't work when you get it out there, then so what, right? So I really appreciate you asking that question. I will say, again, from the Don CIO perspective, we're partnering very closely with our partners in DCI and in N2N6 to say, hey, listen, we got to be thinking not about just the PEO side of this, right, and the deliver capability side of this, but also the operator manpower side of this, and in your case through BSO 60 and everything else, right? We got to be looking at the entire workforce laydown. Do we have the right people in the right places? If we don't, then how do we adjust that without completely upsetting the apple cart? Because it's hard, right? We're late. We should have been having this conversation 5 years ago, right? But now we got to get after it, and this is another place where we're going to have to go really fast. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts there.
Quick ones. Room full of nerds, and fully acknowledge that like what we do only matters if it affects operations. So fully acknowledged, right? The NAV-I4 working on the ConOps is one important piece of this. The WinNIF is working on .mlpf and how we can do that much faster. That's another piece of this. The speed of tech, to Barry's point, Horizon 3 sped up and we had to fix the funnel. So from a theory of constraints perspective, like if we didn't get that part right, like if we didn't have like kind of the overwhelming pressure feeling, I think that'd be potentially a bigger problem. We've started to let more of that through, and so it's how do we get the workforce involved in those? So structured pilots always have an operational component from an agile perspective. If there are people who want to be involved in, hey, we're using this right now, can we get early beta use on that? Can we help write the ConOps for this? We've had a couple cases where we aimed it at the pain points of the users as opposed to what the vendors were selling, and it went from, hey, we have 5 billets to fill a job that we can't fill, to we don't need as many of those anymore. Those are things we can't hire for. This just is streamlined. So where we can use it to work on existing gaps, this is what industry has had a lot of success in. And then there's the jagged edge of AI right now. That's from Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. Like as we learn what is available, it's showing us like what can be disrupted faster than other areas. This is very much a learn by doing things. And so like as we look at the next 6 months, where are the areas that we can figure out this is the highest impact thing, and then how does that get out to the workforce piece like within the POM? And so just real quickly, the valley of death from a tech perspective is also dependent on the POM, but then we've done like 10 things in the last few years in terms of mechanisms to chip away at that. So there's like AppFit, there's reinvigorating the CIBR program. There's a number of ways that we've worked on the tech piece. I think we can do and are doing some similar chip aways at the personnel piece, so we don't have to wait for the POM to have the beginning effects there.
And I'll close that by saying there is an appetite at the leadership level to look very, very, very hard at this. And Emily was talking about a lot of the granular data work that they're doing to quantify the workforce and where we are and what we have. And part of the value of having that data is going to allow us to say, okay, we need this, we look like this, we don't have 5 years to do it, so let's do something here using the authorities we have now to make a shift, to empower the people that are on the edge, to start realigning things in advance of where we know we need to go and start skating to where the puck is as opposed to shooting behind it. So.
Yeah, that would be appreciated, because again, like I said, POM is always 5 years behind. It
Yep.
doesn't keep up with technology. And most of the time, when your systems come out and we're asking for new technology adjustments in our staffing, resource limited is our response.
Yeah.
And so somehow we've got to get the alignment between system acquisition fielding and the O&M resourcing so that they come together at the same pinnacle point when they're hitting the ground.
Yep,
Appreciate it.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And on that last piece, right? We used to be really, really good at what they called integrated logistics support, right? ILS, where when we were putting something out, we said what it would take to run it, and here's the training for it, and here's the other things like that. And we've gotten into this very bad habit of cutting all that stuff out because we were resource limited. And we're going to have to hold ourselves to a higher standard there. So, all right.
Okay, I didn't want
Last
Art to
question.
feel lonely out there. So, first of all, I want to thank Ms. Rathbun for her guidance and direction for Spectrum. It's a great Spectrum day. So to you, Art. So, in Spectrum, we have a lot of tools. You know, we have tools for this. We're good at sunrise, sunset. We're not so great sometimes at modernizing a tool. So, if I was queen for a day, I would take Spectrum 21 and put a lot of enhancements on that, because that's our go-to tool for our data calls as we do repurposing data calls and things of that nature. So I would like to know, Art, what do you think about that?
So
That wasn't a setup.
I was going to say, it's a plan right there. It's a plant right there.
Definitely a great question, and I would say a lot of the things that we've been describing here within the last 20 minutes is very much tied to what you're describing, is how do we build faster and deploy to the services something that's, one, usable, and have the ability to have a user-friendly environment. Those foundations of how do we get that to the operating forces so you're not going through a whole new training cycle. It's intuitive. It's the book that describes the design of everyday things. It's designed because that's the way we think. So that foundation allows us to learn a lot quicker. So yes, I agree, Spectrum 21 is one of those capabilities, but how do we look at it holistically? It's just not tools. Everything that we described today depends on Spectrum, so we look at across the domains. If we talk about air, land, maritime, space, and of course cyber, those foundations of traversing Spectrum, whether you're talking Cat 5 uses Spectrum, if you're talking a generator at 60 hertz, that Spectrum, all those components 100% depend on it, but how do we make those tools do what we need to and plan for the future at a very rapid pace and give that warfighter that capability that provides the end state to get us where we need to be at the pace that we're operating in that environment today.
Thanks, Art. Appreciate it. And thanks, Elvira, for the question. But we are standing between us and lunch, so I'm going to close it out there. Hopefully, you guys got something out of the... Geez, that was loud. Sorry. Hopefully, you guys got something out of the panel. Really appreciate the question and answer. Thanks very much. I'm going to wrap this with a couple of points. In the end, and those of you who've been tracking our world-class alignment metrics have heard me say this before, but I'm going to take the opportunity to do it again. There are two metrics that matter. Do our warfighters have what they need to execute their mission? And are those things there when they need it? That's it. And if we're not asking ourselves those two questions, am I satisfying those two requirements with everything that we're doing, then we need to take a hard look about what we're doing, because we're probably not the right thing. It is what the ISV 2.0 is supposed to provide help with, right? It's supposed to shape the details behind those two real key metrics. So please give us feedback. Please let us know if this is helpful, if it's helping you advance those things and deliver those capabilities in a resilient way so they're there when they need them. And we're all standing by to help. So let's get after it, because the clock is ticking. Thanks very much.
Good one.